105.9 Academy FM.
The sound of Folkestone.
Here at Academy FM Folkestone, we work with many young people, training them to interview and present on the radio. We work to improve communication skills, self-confidence and self-esteem. One project we run is funded by the Wellcome Trust, an organisation that works to highlight the public's awareness of science. Kaiya likes big cats, tigers, lions, panthers, and when she was asked who she'd like to interview, she said the big cat keeper at Port Lympne Wild Animal Park. So we rang them and asked if we could come along, and they said, sure thing, and Richard Barnes, our head keeper, will show you our tigers. What we didn't realise is we'd be brought in beyond the public barriers, able to see the tigers just by the bars of their cage, and they're quite noisy.
He's very pleased to see us, make lots of noise. Okay, so I'll just quickly explain who they are before we start. So this is Tug, he's the male, and then there's three females. Ingrid, Tug's wife, that's that one over there, the pale colour one, and then two of their cubs. Getting quite difficult to tell who's who now because the cubs are nearly as big as Mum. Actually, they're pretty much as big as Mum. They won't get quite as big as Dad there, but yeah. They're getting close to fully grown now, and they're making all the same noises and gestures and stuff that the adults make. They're more big, sort of scary tigers now, so aren't you? Hey.
Do you know what they're like? What the call that they're doing means? Or
This thing that they're doing now at the moment, they're sort of talking to each other. They're kind of saying to me, come on, what are you doing here? Are we going to get any food or anything like that? It's a little bit, not anxiety, but they're anxious about whether or not they're going to get some food, because for a tiger, it's all about feeding and food time. So they're hoping that because we've all showed up and we've come over here, they're like, oh, well, what's on the cards? What's going to happen? So that's kind of them kind of getting a bit excited and a little bit anticipating food, that kind of thing.
how long have you been a keeper at Port Lympne?
Well, I've been a zookeeper for maybe 16th year now, and I've been here at Port Lympne Wild Animal Park for about the last just over 11 years. So yeah, I've been here for quite a while. I've seen lots of animals being born, lots of animals moving to other collections, and I've seen lots of them grow up. So Tug here, our resident male tiger, I've seen him go from a young man without any girlfriend or wife or whatever, and then kind of develop into this big strong tiger, and then sort of have babies of his own. So it's been quite nice.
Yeah. Have you always wanted to work with the big cats?
Big carnivores, yeah, like wolves, dogs, hyenas, lions, tigers, they've always been fascinating for me. As a keeper, you kind of take on any responsibility that you're given, but the carnivores have been the most interesting for me because there's the most need for conservation for them, as there's always conflict between people and carnivores because people are ever encroaching on the land that the tigers, the lions and stuff live in, and unfortunately those that farm the livestock, goats, cattle, whatever, easy meals for tigers, lions, leopards, that kind of thing, so there's always going to be this kind of need for conserving them.
How many of this type of tiger are there left in the wild?
Okay, well this is an Amur, formerly the Siberian tiger. They come from the Amur River region in far eastern Russia, and although there's only between about 500 to 700, we don't know exactly because of the range they live in is so vast, we don't know exactly what the number is, but we've got a pretty good idea. We also know that the population is fairly stable comparatively to other tiger subspecies because they're a lot harder for poachers to track because they're in the far kind of wilderness, if you like, and it's a lot harder to kind of poach tigers that live out there than it is in India or Indochina. So
is it hard work sometimes when, like, do you have to get up early to come here?
Yeah, well, there's good and bad parts of the job, as there is with most things. I live here at the park, so we're always here. If something happens, we're always on call anyway. My work hours are probably different to most. We are meant to clock in at 8 in the morning and finish at 5, but that rarely happens. We don't mind, if the tigers need something specific that we need to do for them, which isn't in our working time but it's out of hours, then we'll do that. If we need to mix animals together and it works better in the evening because they're more active, then we'll work in the evening and we'll do that. So that kind of thing, that doesn't bother me. That's not really the work. Some of the hard bits, like some of the gardening we have to do, lots of grass cutting, lots of strimming, lots of pruning back, we have to do that kind of thing. Lots of scrubbing to make the ponds and swimming pools nice and clean for them. We also have to do lots of building work, so we have to, be a kind of dab hand at everything really, and it's not just feeding and cleaning. But I guess the heaviest work we do is probably, because they're carnivores, they're big cats, they eat very large chunks of meat. So someone like Tug here, he could quite happily scoff down 40 or 50 kilo piece of meat in one go. Now that's about, give or take, half the weight of me. So having to carry these bits of meat around is quite hard work sometimes. It certainly puts you back through a bit of exercise. And what we try to do as well, we don't like just putting the meat in there on the floor. So sometimes we hang it up, so we have to tie it up and then sort of winch it up by hand. Sometimes we have to climb up a tree and hang it on a branch of the tree just to make it more interesting for the animals. And so that's always, a little bit more hard work, but we don't mind.
So we're listening to one of the students from the Folkestone Academy interview Richard Barnes, head keeper at Portland Wild Animal Park. Kaiya is very interested in big cats and got the opportunity to be within stroking distance of the Amur tigers at the park. She wanted to know where all the animals in the park came from originally.
Okay, so we get our animals from all over the world, from different collections. Some we take from other safari parks and zoos in this country, some from wild animal parks around the world in Europe, sometimes the States, sometimes Australia, sometimes Africa. And the idea is that all of the animals that we have that are endangered are in a breeding programme, and we work with all of these other guys around the world to try and make sure that the bloodlines stay pure, so the animals don't inbreed with each other, so we don't have mothers and sons and father and daughter matings, that kind of thing. And as soon as the animals have grown up to a point where they're at breeding age, we'll try to get them out of their groups, like the young girls in here. We'll take them out and put them into another situation where they can either go on and breed themselves or certainly don't breed with dad here. So yeah, we work with loads and loads of different types of people all around the world. So it does mean that sometimes we've got to speak different languages. I'm not very good at that. I don't speak any other language except English. So I do try, but we do have people that do speak lots of different languages, so we can always communicate quite well in the zoo world.
What's the problem with fathers and daughters breeding and...
Okay, well, it's not something we would like them to do. It's not healthy for them if there's offspring born from inbreeding, so mother, son, or father, daughter, or even uncle and niece, that kind of mix, then there can be genetic faults. It means that they may have really bad things anatomically, so they might have blindness, they might have not the right shaped faces, they might have paws attached to their faces, that kind of thing. All kinds of weird faults which come along with inbreeding. And one of the things we're quite keen to do here is promote the non-breeding of white tigers, because white tiger breeding is basically inbreeding. They inbreed this special gene that the white tiger carries with each other. So mother and son, father, daughter are quite often breeding combinations to basically get a white offspring. We don't think this is a good idea because some of them, they don't come out looking very nice, and they're nearly always blind or always deaf. They've got heart defects, liver defects, that kind of thing. So that's typically why we don't recommend that we should breed these kind of lines, and that's why we try to keep them as pure as possible if we can.
Some people feel that it's not right to keep animals in captivity when there's conservation and reservation parks in their own habitats. What do you feel about this?
Yeah, well, I agree. It would be ideal for us not to have to keep any of these animals in parks like Port Lim or zoos or safari parks around the world. Unfortunately, us as a species, humans, we haven't been very nice to most of these animals, and we've hunted a lot of them to extinction or close to. And so without the work that all of these collections around the world are doing to kind of have a captive population, we'd probably lose most of them. The work that we do here at the Aspinall Foundation is to try and work closely with the countries where these animals would exist in the wild, and we try to, wherever possible, send some back, but we try to monitor and help the ones that already live out there, and that is kind of the key focus of all the work we do. So without these animals being here for the visitors to see and to help us raise money, we wouldn't be able to do any of the overseas work. And so we really feel that all the animals that live overseas in the places that they should live is where they should be, and that's really the key for what we do. And so in an ideal world there would be no need for us to have all these fenced animals, but unfortunately we don't live in an ideal world, and so until there's such a time where we could know that they're all going to be so safe, because you mentioned about conservation and reservation type parks, national parks and things like that, they're only as safe as they can be when we're guarding them and whatever. There's always going to be animals that can get poached or will get poached, and the ever decreasing numbers of them, like tigers, the less there are of them, the harder it is for us to make them safe and make the places that they live safe for us to put tigers back. So it's not an ideal situation, but hopefully if everyone tries to work for the same thing, eventually we'll get somewhere with it, and it would be really nice to see a boost in tiger numbers in the future. Can only hope.
Does it always work when you bring the animals back to the wild, or do you ever have to bring them back?
It doesn't always work sending animals back. Obviously animals that are born in captivity have a very different life to those that have been born in the wild. Now what we try to do wherever we've done that in the past, the foundation here has always been to kind of get the animals into a situation where we think they're going to have skills which they would obviously learn in the wild from mum or from other group members, but certainly we have to teach them skills. So say, take the gorillas for example, you have to teach them kind of what foods to eat and how much of it to eat, and not to eat too much of something that might be toxic, that kind of thing. For the rhinos, the same. They have to know what branches of what trees they can eat. When they're in the wild, in a reserve or whatever, they can just go and find the stuff to eat, but they have to find out themselves a little bit what that is. With the tigers or dogs or hyenas or anything like that, you don't just have to show them what to eat, but you obviously have to show them how to hunt as well. So having them in an environment where mum and dad are kind of raising them and they teach them things, if they might catch a bird or a rabbit in this enclosure, that's kind of hunting skills. Mum will sometimes catch stuff when they're very small, and she'll just leave it so they can chase it, much like would happen in the wild. We don't put any live food in there, obviously that wouldn't happen, but if they were to catch something that was already in there or something that flew in there, then mum would just try to show them how to kind of kill that animal. And yeah, so if we were to release, say, some tigers, just as an example, if we were to put them back, we definitely have to show them certain skills. Instinct, which they always have, they'll always stalk certain people that they don't like. If a goat was to walk down outside of the enclosure now, they'd all be over at the fence stalking it, because they know that that's something that they could eat, and they don't lose that. They could be born in captivity, but they'll always have that instinct. As for bringing them back, generally once we've sent an animal back to live in the wild where it should kind of live, we just have our fingers crossed and hope, and we try to give it as much support as we can when we've done that. We employ people out there who kind of follow these animals, they monitor them, they survey them, and they make sure that the ones that we've tried to put back just get along really. And if they do kind of need some form of intervention, we feel better about doing that. If a vet needs to then act and give some medicine to one of them, it's different to if we were just interrupting with a wild animal that was already living there. So because we put it back there, sometimes they'll need a bit of help, but generally some of the stuff that we've put back has worked quite well, so hopefully it will continue to go that way.
Kaiya and producer Helen went to Portland Wild Animal Park and saw the Amur tigers up close. They're amazing creatures to look at, and when Tug stands on his hind legs, he's about 7 foot tall, with his front paws probably reaching the 9 foot mark. He's an impressive animal to look at. He has big claws and very sharp looking teeth. But he knows head keeper Richard Barnes very well, and he likes to have a sneaky stroke when his daughters aren't looking. Through the bars of the cage, Richard obliged.
And Tug quite often gets a bit miffed with his two daughters like that. Did you hear what he just did then? That was like, don't come over here. I'm getting a fuss and I'm enjoying it. Yes, I'm getting a fuss and I'm enjoying it. Yes. Oh! He's a good boy, Tug. He's a good boy. So he's one of our best big cats because he's so friendly. We can let people come up and meet him nice and close. If you want, just want to touch him there to have a little stroke of what it feels like. Good boy, Tug. Good boy. He's a good lad.
How long do they live for in captivity?
Sorry?
How long do they live for in captivity?
They live a lot longer in captivity than they do in the wild. On average, anywhere past 10 or 12 would be really old in the wild. In captivity, late teens, early 20s is kind of an average. We generally, because we try to give them the best level of care that we obviously can, we tend to see quite a lot of health problems that come with not really being built to live as long, and so renal failure is the most common one, where their liver and kidneys pack up. Quite often they get things like diabetes as well if they get too old, because they're, they in the wild they have a really, really hard life. They live hard and die young generally, and in captivity they don't live hard, and they generally go on for a lot longer.
So what do you do with a tiger with diabetes?
You can treat them. Generally we don't see it a lot. We don't really tend to get that kind of thing in a tiger or a lion until they're very late teens anyway, and so it depends how far on it is. Certainly with other species within the park, we've had monkeys that have got diabetes, and they get treated on a daily basis, just the same as humans do, with pill form of insulin or even injections. But yeah, it's a little bit more difficult to maybe notice that a tiger's got diabetes, because they don't really have a high sugar diet or anything like that. They eat a lot of meat, and so it would be kind of just from deteriorating health, really. So generally there are other things that kind of come into play that mean you have to kind of help them along way before it gets to the point of diabetes.
The renal failure thing is common with domestic cats.
It is, yeah, much the same, except it's far easier to treat your domestic cat. You can just whip it down to the vets. It's not quite as easy. We've got very good on-site vets here, and they're very good zoo vets. They're not just small cat vets, obviously, and so they'll come and have a look at the tigers. If we've got any health issues, we'll keep them informed. We do periodical knockouts if we think that the animals need to be looked over, given a once over, and the vets will do all of that kind of stuff. Are you trying to get some? Yeah, so generally we try to keep them all in the peak of health. They let us know by their behaviour. A good animal keeper can spot the slightest change in behaviour. If we think that Tug's under the weather, it will be so easy to tell, because he wouldn't come over and say hello, or he'd just sit there feeling sorry for himself. Even by the way they walk over, if they're not really walking fluently, and they seem like there's a bit of a stumble or whatever, then we can check all of their pads that they haven't got anything in and that kind of thing. So generally, those of us that work with them know them so well that we can pick it up quite quickly. And the quicker you pick up an illness or a disease or any kind of sickness, the quicker it can be treated, and the less they'll be affected by it completely. And much like domestic cats and dogs, they respond very well to medicine. So if we do know there's a problem, once we start treating it, it's very quickly turned around. And also, because they eat meat so readily, like you just saw, we can hide pills or wormers or anything like that we need to give them. Very easy to just make them take it. They don't even realise half the time.
Thanks.
Respond to their names?
Oh yeah, of course they do. Yeah, Tug, if we call him, we're over here and there's a crowd of people, even if we're not wearing our zoo uniform, if we're just in civvies sort of clothes, we can shout him if he's the other end, and if he's hungry and he knows he wants food and he's heard our voice, he'll come over. Or if he's just in a good mood and he wants to come over for a scratch, he'll run over just to see us. And so yeah, they all know their names. I think you kind of compare it to your domestic animals, your cats or your dogs, they know their name. A lot of it's to do with how you call them, so the tone of your voice, your actions, your gesturing to them. But the big cats and dogs, they're much cleverer than our domestic pets, so they always respond. Tug would be able to pick out someone that he knows and likes out of 100 people, and so.
Thank you so much for letting me come and stroke Tug and answering all the questions.
That's all right. I hope it's been a help, and hopefully if you or anyone else wants to be an animal keeper, then they've heard me say some of the cool stuff about the job and the animals, and hopefully that'll help them make their mind up.
Okay, thank you.
Right.